The wind howled across the frozen sea, carrying whispers of a kingdom long forgotten. Beneath the pale shimmer of the northern lights, an island of ice slept, silent, beautiful, and cursed. No ship dared to approach it, for those who had never returned spoke of a castle made entirely of frost and sorrow. Inside its frozen halls, a queen with snow-pale skin and eyes of midnight guarded a secret she could not bury. Her name was Snow White, and this was not the fairy tale the world remembered. Once, her laughter filled green forests and golden halls. Now, only the echo of her voice drifted through corridors of crystal. They said she fled from mirrors and memories, from the blood that once stained her hands, though none knew whose it was. In the cold silence, she ruled over nothing but ice and ghosts. Yet deep within the heart of the island, something stirred. Something that would force her to remember what warmth once felt like. Far beyond the horizon, a storm was rising. A stranger had seen the glimmer of the ice castle from his ship's bow and refused to turn away. Destiny, it seemed, was breaking through the frost once more. Snow White would soon face the truth buried beneath the snow, and the choice that could melt or shatter the island forever. The castle's towers shimmered like glass under the moonlight, their spires piercing the mist that veiled the sea. Inside, Snow White sat upon a throne of carved ice, her fingers tracing cracks that had begun to form across its surface. Each fracture was a reminder of the years gone, of warmth forgotten, of a heart once alive. She listened to the quiet hum of the wind through frozen corridors, a song that both comforted and condemned her. For even in silence, she could still hear the mirror's whisper. It had called her the fairest, but never the kindest. It had praised beauty and punished truth. Once, she had smashed it, shards flying like falling stars, yet its voice had never truly died. Now, she felt it beneath the ice, pulsing like a heartbeat, the curse she could not escape. She rose from her throne, the hem of her gown trailing frost across the floor. Outside her window, the northern lights wept across the black sky, casting waves of blue and green upon the snow. She had built her kingdom here to forget the pain of the world below, the betrayals, the poisoned apple, the prince's fading warmth. But the island had grown lonely, even for a queen, and somewhere beneath its frozen crust, something was changing, melting. Far across the ocean, a small ship battled waves that rose like white beasts. Its captain, a young man named Elias, clung to the mast as ice tore at his sails. He had heard the legends of the ice island where no man returned, yet he sailed on, guided by a star that refused to fade, for he was not seeking gold or glory, but redemption. Beneath his coat, he carried a silver locket engraved with a name he could not forget. The name belonged to the queen who once saved his mother's life, Snow White, the lost sovereign of a fallen kingdom. Rumors said she had turned her heart to frost, her castle to a tomb of mirrors. Elias did not believe in curses, only choices, and he had chosen to find her. The storm raged for 3 nights, tearing at his resolve. Yet when dawn finally broke, he saw it, a glimmer on the horizon, brighter than the sun. The ice castle rose like a mountain of crystal, shimmering in impossible beauty. "So the legends were true," he whispered. "Now let them end." Snow White stood before the frozen lake that served as her castle's heart. Beneath its surface, something glowed, faint, red, and alive. It was the heart of winter, the source of her power and her prison alike. When she had fled the human world, she had bound her grief into the crystal core below, sealing it with her own tears. But now the ice was thinning. Cracks spread like veins of light, whispering of change. "It cannot be," she murmured, kneeling to touch the glass-like surface. Her reflection trembled, and for an instant she saw another face within it, a woman older, gentler, smiling through the frost. Her mother. Snow White stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. "No, you're gone." But the lake pulsed again, and she felt warmth, faint but real, brush against her fingertips. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled and the sea roared. Someone was coming. Elias's ship shattered against the ice just before sunrise. He crawled onto the shore, coughing, his hands bleeding from the climb. Around him, the island stretched in endless silence, mountains of ice, caves of sapphire light, and air so cold it burned to breathe. Every step he took echoed like a drumbeat through eternity. He saw footprints frozen into the snow. Delicate, perfect, impossibly preserved. They led toward the castle. His pulse quickened. "She's real," he breathed. The tales had not lied. He followed the trail, though shadows watched from the cliffs, whispering through the wind. At last, the gates appeared. 2 pillars of pure diamond, carved with roses of frost. As he touched them, the doors opened without a sound, as though the island itself had been waiting. Inside, the air shimmered with a cold so beautiful it hurt to feel. Somewhere deep within, a voice sang a single note, haunting, human, and heartbreakingly lonely. Snow White stood in the great hall, her voice echoing like water through crystal caverns. It was an old lullaby, one her mother used to sing before the huntsman, before the apple, before the crown. Her song filled the air with shimmering light, each note spinning into snowflakes that glowed with memory. But when the final note faded, so did her strength. She pressed her palm to her chest. Beneath her skin, the cold had begun to spread again. "The island must not melt," she whispered, gripping the edge of her throne. "If it does, I will fade with it." The ice had become her armor, and her cage. Without it, she was just a woman with a broken past. Then, footsteps. Slow, uncertain, echoing closer. Her heart lurched. No one had walked those halls for years. "Who dares?" she began, her voice trembling like glass. And then she saw him, a young man at the edge of her reflection, eyes bright with both fear and faith. Elias froze, half believing he was dreaming. She stood before him, pale as moonlight, cloaked in silver and sorrow. Her beauty was not the softness of legend, but sharp, cold, and unyielding. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her tone a whisper wrapped in warning. He bowed slightly, breath fogging in the chill. "My name is Elias. I came seeking the Queen of Winter." Her eyes narrowed, though something flickered within them. Surprise, or perhaps pain. "That queen no longer exists," she replied. "You will find only ghosts here." "Then let me find them," he said softly, "because ghosts remember what the living forget." For the first time in years, Snow White faltered. The wind shifted, scattering frost like stars between them, and for one fleeting heartbeat, the ice around her throne cracked. Deep in the heart of the castle, beneath a staircase of frozen glass, a low hum began to stir. The mirror, shattered long ago, began to knit itself together. Shards quivered, rose, and fused, forming a single sheet of darkness. From within it, a voice sighed, silky and venomous. "The queen has been found." Its surface rippled, showing Snow White and Elias standing in the hall. "The heart warms again," it whispered, "and with it, the curse breaks loose." A shadow slipped from the mirror's edge, crawling along the floor like smoke. It sought the cracks in the ice, the places where light bled through. Above, Snow White shuddered. "The air has changed," she murmured. Elias frowned, gripping his sword. "What is it?" She looked toward the floor, her expression darkening. "Something that was never meant to wake." The shadow moved swiftly, whispering old names, names Snow White had buried. It coiled around the walls, flickering with faces from her past, the huntsman, the prince, her stepmother's cruel smile. "No," she gasped, clutching her chest. "You are gone." But the shadow only laughed. "Not gone. Merely waiting." Elias stepped forward, his sword gleaming faintly in the blue light. He slashed through the darkness, and for a moment it recoiled, hissing like steam. "You cannot fight memory," Snow White warned him. "It feeds on what I feel." "Then stop feeding it," he said firmly. "Let me carry it instead." She turned to him, eyes wide. No one had ever spoken to her that way. The shadow lunged again, but this time she raised her hand, and light burst from her palm. Together, they drove it back into the ice. For now. After the battle, silence fell once more. Snow White knelt by the frozen lake, tracing the ripples left by her power. Elias stood beside her, still shaking from what he had seen. "That thing? What was it?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "My reflection. The part of me that never healed." He crouched beside her, his breath soft in the chill. "Then we'll heal it," he said simply. "Together." She looked at him, torn between disbelief and longing. No one had ever spoken of together in her world, only of thrones and solitude. The word felt like fire beneath her ribs. For the first time in years she smiled, faintly, but real. "If you stay," she said, "you'll be trapped here." Elias met her gaze. "Then I'll make the ice my home." And somewhere deep below, the heart of winter pulsed, not with pain, but with hope. Days passed. The castle began to change. Frost that had clung to the walls for decades began to weep, droplets of pure water that shimmered like tears. The northern lights grew brighter, their glow turning from cold blue to warm gold. Snow White watched in awe and fear. The thaw had begun. Elias explored the island, finding statues buried in the snow, servants, guards, perhaps even friends she had frozen to save them from time. "Can they be freed?" he asked. Snow White's eyes glistened. "Only if I let myself live again?" The answer terrified her more than the mirror's curse ever had. As the first flower bud pushed through the frost, she felt her heart ache with something she had not known in years, warmth. But deep in the bowels of the castle the mirror smiled. "So the ice melts," it whispered. "Then so shall the chains." Morning broke soft and strange upon the ice island. The once blue horizon now shimmered with gold, and from the cracks in the snow, tiny blossoms emerged, white as milk, trembling in the chill. Snow White knelt to touch one, her fingers brushing the petal as though afraid it would vanish. "It shouldn't be possible," she whispered. "Nothing grows here." Elias smiled faintly, his breath forming clouds in the air. "Maybe it's not the island that's changing," he said. "Maybe it's you." His words struck her deeper than he knew. She turned away, afraid he might see the truth reflected in her eyes, the part of her that still longed for the warmth she once feared. Above them, icicles began to fall, melting before they touched the ground. The sound was soft, like rain for the first time in decades. The island was waking, and with every heartbeat, Snow White's power trembled between creation and collapse. That night, Snow White dreamt of her old kingdom, the scent of apple blossoms, the laughter of children, the warmth of sunlight on her skin. She saw her prince, his eyes full of devotion and doubt. "Why did you leave?" his voice asked, echoing through mist. "Because love turns to loss," she whispered, "and I was too weak to lose again." When she woke, tears had frozen upon her cheeks. Elias sat nearby, mending his coat beside the fire he had managed to spark. "You were crying," he said gently. She looked away. "Even dreams can wound." He nodded, understanding more than she realized. Outside, the sea moaned against the cliffs, and a strange light flickered beneath the ice, red, wild, alive. Snow White felt its pull deep in her chest. The heart of winter was stirring again, but this time it beat not with sorrow, but warning. The next morning, the sea had risen. Waves of slush and foam slammed against the shore, sending cracks through the frozen cliffs. Elias stood at the edge, scanning the horizon. "The storm's coming back," he called. Snow White joined him, her face pale. "No, this isn't a storm. It's the sea remembering she had bound the tides when she sealed her heart, freezing the ocean so no one could find her. Now the magic was unraveling, and the sea wanted its freedom. If the island melts too quickly, "It will sink," she whispered, "and everything on it will drown, including us." Elias took her hand, his grip steady. "Then we find a way to control it," he said. "You can't cage the sea forever, but maybe you can teach it to sing?" For a moment she wanted to believe him, but somewhere deep below, the mirror laughed, its voice rippling like cracks in glass. In the lowest hall of the castle, Frost reformed into a face. The mirror's shadow smiled, whispering to the frozen walls. She softens. The queen melts. Its reflection shimmered with false warmth, revealing an image of Elias, but twisted, eyes black as coal. He will break her, as all do. It sent shards of its darkness through the corridors, weaving them into dreams. That night, as Snow White slept, visions filled her mind. Elias standing over her, blade drawn, whispering her stepmother's words, "You will never be free." She woke with a scream, the room erupting in frost. Elias rushed to her side, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me," she cried. He froze, startled. "Snow, what's wrong?" But she could not speak, only stare at his reflection in the ice, where for a heartbeat his face had changed. The mirror was winning. Dawn brought silence. The tension between them was sharp as glass. Snow White wandered the corridors alone, her thoughts circling like crows. Could I have been deceived again? She hated the doubt that bloomed in her. It reminded her of the life she had fled. Elias followed at a distance, unwilling to leave, but unsure how to stay. He found her in the chamber of frozen roses, their petals glittering like tears. "You think I'll betray you," he said quietly. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. He sighed and placed his locket on the floor between them. "This belonged to your mother," he said. "She saved my family. That's why I came. Not to hurt you, but to return what's yours." When he walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoed like breaking ice. Snow White stared at the locket, and a single tear fell onto it, warm enough to melt the frost. When she touched the locket, the world blurred into light. She saw her mother, not as a queen, but as a woman of laughter and courage. "My Snow," the vision whispered, "the world will wound you, but it is not meant to own you. Do not bury your heart, let it bloom." The voice faded, leaving warmth in her palms. Snow White gasped, dropping to her knees. For the first time she understood. Her exile had never been protection, it was punishment. She had feared loss so deeply that she had caged herself in ice. "Mother," she whispered, "what have I done?" The locket glowed once more, and the walls around her began to drip, not with tears, but with water. The thaw deepened, the sea roared louder, and she felt her power shifting. If I melt this curse, she realized, I melt myself. But for the first time, she did not fear it. Snow White found Elias near the cliffs, watching the storm build on the horizon. He turned as she approached, unsure whether to speak, but she reached out, taking his hand before words could form. "You were right," she said softly. "I've been fighting ghosts that no longer deserve my fear." He smiled faintly, though his eyes still carried the ache of distance. "Then let's finish what they started." Together, they climbed the ridge overlooking the lake of ice. The heart of winter pulsed below, brighter than ever. "It's time," Snow White said, "to end this." As their joined hands reached toward the crystal surface, warmth bloomed, enough to melt the snow around them. But far beneath, something stirred. The mirror's final shadow, rising to protect the prison it had built. The true battle was about to begin. The air cracked open with thunder. The sky itself seemed to split as the mirror's spirit rose, a storm of glass and fury. It took the shape of a woman, beautiful and cruel, her face a reflection of Snow White's own. "You cannot destroy me," it hissed. "I am every tear you've frozen, every love you've denied." Elias drew his sword, but the spirit laughed. "Steel cannot kill sorrow," it said, striking him down with a wave of frost. Snow White screamed his name, her grief igniting into power. "Then I will not kill you," she said, rising, her eyes blazing. "I will forgive you." The spirit faltered, confusion flickering across its flawless face. Snow White stepped forward, tears falling freely now. "You are me, the pain I refuse to feel, and I release you." Light burst from her heart, flooding the island in warmth. The storm shattered, and the spirit dissolved into snow. When the light faded, the castle was no longer ice but crystal water. Streams flowed through once frozen halls, carrying reflections of spring. The statues in the courtyard stirred, eyes opening after decades of stillness. Snow White watched them awaken, her people, freed at last. Elias lay beside her, weak but alive. She helped him sit, her hands trembling. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she replied softly. "We did." Around them, the island breathed, its long winter finally broken. But with each drop that fell, her body grew fainter, transparent as mist. "The curse was part of me," she said, smiling through tears. "If it melts, so do I." Elias shook his head, clutching her hand. "Then I'll hold you together." But the warmth in her fingers was fading, and her reflection in the water began to blur. Snow White knelt at the edge of the thawing lake. The heart of winter glowed softly beneath the surface, pulsing with her final strength. She looked at Elias, eyes shining like sunrise. "Tell them I was not a queen of ice," she whispered. "Tell them I was a woman who loved too deeply." Elias's tears fell onto her hands, turning to diamonds as they touched. "Don't leave," he begged. But she smiled, pressing the locket into his palm. "I'm not leaving. I'm becoming what I was meant to be, part of the light." As dawn broke, the entire island bloomed. Flowers, rivers, and golden mist rising where frost once ruled. Snow White's figure dissolved into the morning glow, her voice lingering in the wind. Every winter ends when the heart remembers spring. The ice island was gone, but the legend of the queen who melted her own curse lived forever. When the storm finally cleared, Elias stood alone at the edge of what had once been the ice island. Now it shimmered beneath a golden haze, rivers flowing where walls of frost had stood, meadows blooming from beneath the thaw. The air was warm, fragrant, and alive, yet the silence was unbearable. He searched the horizon for her, calling her name into the wind. Only the echo returned, carried softly through the mist. He pressed the locket to his heart, the last piece of her he still held. "You promised you'd never leave," he whispered, his voice breaking. A white bird landed nearby, its feathers glowing faintly in the morning sun. It tilted its head, and Elias swore he saw her eyes reflected in its gaze. Calm, kind, and endless. "You're here," he breathed, falling to his knees. "You never left." As days passed, life returned to the island. The once frozen forests became lush with silver leaves and pale blue flowers. The water that had melted from the castle turned into a lake so clear that it mirrored the heavens. Travelers who came near the shores saw it and spoke of miracles. Elias built a small shelter by the water's edge, refusing to leave the place where she had vanished. Each dawn, the sunlight would strike the surface, and mist shaped like her silhouette would rise, watching over him. "She's not gone," he told those who visited. "She's become the island itself." In time, people began to settle there, calling it Ardora, the land of light. They crowned Elias its first guardian, though he took no throne. "This is her kingdom," he said simply. "I am only its keeper." And every night, when stars lit the sky, he whispered a prayer of thanks to the queen who had given the world back its spring. But peace never comes without memory. One evening, the tide rose higher than before, glowing faintly red beneath the moon. Elias watched as the water stirred and hissed, forming shapes of shadows beneath the surface. "No," he murmured, "you should be gone." From the depths, a fragment of black glass surfaced, a shard of the mirror, untouched by light. The shadow of its voice whispered faintly, Every warmth has its price. Elias reached for it, but the water burned like ice. You will not take her back, he swore, tossing the shard into the fire. Yet as the flame devoured it, he felt something shift in the air, a heartbeat beneath the soil, slow and heavy. The island trembled. Snow White's light had not erased all darkness. Something still lingered beneath the thaw. The lake grew restless in the following nights. Its once clear surface turned misty, and whispers echoed from its depths. Elias stood by the shore, unable to sleep, the locket warm in his hand. What do you want from me? He demanded. The lake shimmered and answered. A faint image formed on the water, Snow White, her face pale but serene. Elias, she said, her voice carrying like wind through glass, do not grieve me, but beware, the ice remembers. Her figure flickered, then dissolved. He reached toward her, but only ripples remained. He fell to his knees, trembling. Then tell me what to do, he whispered. But the lake was silent once more. Far below its calm surface, a pulse of darkness stirred, the last remnant of the mirror's curse, searching for a vessel. By dawn, the island began to darken again, not from storm clouds, but from within. Flowers wilted, rivers slowed, and the once golden sky dimmed to gray. Elias gathered the people. Something stirs beneath us, he warned. Do not wander near the lake. That night, a girl named Lyra, one of the firstborn on Ardora, wandered too close to the shore. The water glowed red, and from it rose a shadow shaped like her reflection. When she returned, her eyes gleamed with frost. The queen calls me, she whispered, voice not her own. Elias felt the truth strike his heart. The mirror's spirit had found a host, innocent, young, and pure enough to twist. No, he said, gripping his sword, you will not claim her. But deep within the wind, the voice of the mirror laughed once more. The light melts. The shadow waits. Lyra's touch turned cold as she slept. Frost spread from her fingertips, tracing patterns across the floor of the shelter. The villagers prayed, fearing the return of the curse. Elias watched over her, tormented by guilt. It's my fault, he whispered. I should have destroyed it all. But then, in the still of midnight, the locket on his chest began to glow. A soft warmth radiated outward, melting the frost near Lyra's bed. A voice filled the room, gentle and familiar. Do not despair, my guardian, it whispered. Every darkness needs a light to guide it home. Elias lifted the locket, tears in his eyes. Snow, he breathed. The warmth spread through the room, surrounding Lyra in golden light. Her breath steadied and the frost retreated, but only for now. The shadow had not gone. It had simply hidden deeper within her. Elias sought counsel from the ancient archives beneath the melted castle ruins. There, carved into the walls, were the old words of the queen's spell. Only a heart unafraid of pain can bear the flame that ends the frost. He understood then what Snow White had done, and what he must do now. He returned to Lyra, holding the locket. This belonged to her, he said softly, and through it, she lives. The girl's eyes glimmered with both fear and shadow. She's inside me, Lyra whispered. But so is something else. Elias nodded. Then we'll save you both. He placed the locket on her chest and began to speak the words etched into the stone. The light flared, filling the room, burning, searing, cleansing. Lyra screamed, her shadow twisting like smoke. And as the last word left his lips, the light exploded, casting the darkness into the sea once more. When the light dimmed, Lyra opened her eyes, clear, calm, alive. But Elias saw something beyond her gaze. A shimmer in the air, a form taking shape. Snow White stood before him, her body woven from mist and morning light. You called me back, she said softly. Elias fell to his knees. I never stopped calling. She smiled, though sorrow lingered in her expression. The island is healed, but the world still carries winter in its heart. I cannot stay. He reached out, but his hand passed through hers like sunlight through water. Then tell me what to do, he pleaded. Snow White's eyes gleamed with tears. Live, she said, love, and teach them not to fear the cold, for even winter has its beauty. As she spoke, the dawn rose once more, and her image began to fade into the light. Years passed, and the island flourished. Children played where the ice had once trapped souls, and flowers grew even through frost. Lyra became a healer, her hands glowing with the light Snow White left behind. And Elias, now older, became the storyteller of the island, the keeper of its heart. He would gather the children by the lake at sunset and tell them the tale. Once there was a queen who built a castle of ice to hide her heart. But a man reminded her that warmth can heal, not just destroy. The children listened with wide eyes, never knowing the story's pain, only its hope. When they asked if the queen ever returned, Elias would smile. She never left. Every snowfall, every flower that blooms after frost, that's her gift. And when the northern lights appeared above the lake, he always bowed his head, whispering, "Good night, my queen." One winter evening, as the stars shimmered over Ardora, Elias stood alone by the water's edge. The locket still hung around his neck, its glow faint but steady. He felt the years in his bones, yet his heart was calm. "It's time," he murmured. "You've waited long enough." He opened the locket, and a soft light spilled forth, brighter than moonlight, warmer than memory. Snowflakes began to fall, each one glowing with golden fire. "Come home," he whispered, closing his eyes. The wind rose, carrying his voice into the heavens. At dawn, the villagers found him by the lake, peaceful, smiling. The locket lay open beside him, empty but shining. Above, the sky blazed with auroras, and within their light, two figures walked hand in hand across the horizon. The Queen of Winter and her guardian, reunited forever in the glow of eternal spring. Generations passed, and Ardora thrived. The lake where Snow White and Elias once stood became a sacred place, a mirror of the sky where no frost ever formed. The people built a shrine at its edge, calling it the Heart of Morning. They said that when the sun touched its surface, you could see two figures walking beneath the light. Children learned the story not as a tragedy, but as a promise that love could thaw even the deepest cold. Mothers told their sons to be brave, fathers told their daughters to be kind, and every winter's end was celebrated as the Queen's blessing. Yet some whispered that the legend was not done, that the light still waited for a purpose. On the night of the century's first snowfall, the auroras burned brighter than ever before. From their glow descended a spark, tiny, golden, and alive. It drifted across the lake and fell into the arms of a child newly born. The island rejoiced. They said the queen had sent a gift. The child was named Arden, born beneath the auroras that never faded. Her eyes were silver, and when she laughed, snowflakes danced in the air. The elders knew at once. She carried the spirit of the queen's light. "She will either heal us," one whispered, "or awaken what still sleeps below." As Arden grew, strange things began to happen. Flowers bloomed in midwinter, rivers froze into crystal bridges that sang when stepped upon. Yet with every wonder came whispers of shadow. The lake began to darken on certain nights, its reflection showing not the stars, but storms. Arden often stood at its edge, sensing something calling her name beneath the water. "Who are you?" she would ask, and though no one else could hear it, a voice would sometimes answer, soft, sorrowful, and cold. "I am what was left behind." On her 16th birthday, Arden found a black crystal lodged beneath the roots of an ancient tree. It pulsed faintly, with crimson light, whispering like a heartbeat. "Take me," it said. "You are her blood, and mine." Fear trembled in her, yet she could not look away. When she touched it, visions flooded her mind. The ice castle, the mirror, the storm that nearly devoured the world. "You are her shadow," the crystal hissed. "Without me, she was never whole." Arden dropped it, gasping, and ran. But the whisper followed her. That night, the first frost in 100 years returned. It crept across the grass, wrapped the trees, and silenced the birds. The elders gathered in fear. "The curse awakens," they said. But Arden, trembling by her window, whispered to herself, "No, it's not a curse. It's a memory." Arden dreamed of the lake. Beneath its calm surface, she saw a woman made of glass, weeping tears that turned to snow. "You carry my name," the figure said, "but you do not know my truth." Arden reached toward her, and their hands almost met before the vision shattered into darkness. She woke at dawn, her breath fogging the air. Frost clung to her fingers like jewels. "Mother," she whispered, though she didn't know why. A faint light pulsed from the locket she wore, the same one Elias had once carried, now passed down through the generations. The voice came again, clearer now. "Find me, free me." Arden looked toward the lake, where a single patch of ice had begun to reform at its center. "If I do," she whispered, "will it end the cold?" The wind answered, or begin it anew. Determined to uncover the truth, Arden set out for the ruins of the old ice castle. The path was treacherous, though the island was now lush. The land surrounding the lake still bore scars of frost. Each step forward felt like walking through another lifetime. In the ruins, she found carvings, half buried in moss, images of a woman with eyes like stars and hands outstretched toward a mirror. Beneath them, a single phrase remained clear. "Only by embracing both the shadow and the light can the heart be whole." Arden touched the words, feeling warmth beneath her palm. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the lake's center began to glow. A pillar of blue fire rose from its depths, spiraling into the sky. The mirror's shard she had found pulsed in her pocket, awake again. "It's calling," she whispered, "and I have to answer." That night, the auroras turned crimson. The island's rivers froze mid-current, and silence fell over Ardora. Arden stood alone at the edge of the glowing lake, the shard clutched in her hand. "Show me who you are," she commanded. The water split open, revealing the reflection of Snow White, radiant, sorrowful, ageless. "I was both the queen and the prisoner," the reflection said. "And now you are both my heir and my test." Behind her, a second image appeared, the dark mirror, fractured yet alive. "Light and shadow," Arden whispered. "You can't exist without each other?" The reflection nodded. "Then prove it." The ice beneath her feet cracked, and a spiral of frost rose, encasing her in a cage of light and darkness. Her trial had begun. Inside the cage, Arden faced countless reflections, each showing a version of herself. In some, she was a queen of flame. In others, a woman made of ice. "Which one are you?" the voices whispered. "The savior? Or the curse?" She pressed her palms against the mirrors, her heart pounding. "I am both," she cried. "I am her light, her pain, her promise." The mirrors shuddered, splintering at her words. The voices grew silent, replaced by a warmth that filled the air. When the cage dissolved, Snow White stood before her, not as a spirit, but as a woman of flesh and breath. "You have done what I could not," she said softly. "You have forgiven both halves of our heart." Arden fell to her knees, tears of light streaming down her face. "Then what now?" she whispered. Snow White smiled. "Now we rise." The lake erupted in light so brilliant it turned night into day. The island shook, but not from fear, from rebirth. The ice melted into rivers that sang, the sky burned gold, and the people of Ardora gathered in awe. "She has returned," they cried. Snow White stood beside Arden, her hand resting upon her daughter's shoulder. "The heart of winter is free," she said, "and with it the world shall know balance." For the first time, warmth and frost coexisted. Snow fell gently onto blooming fields, and sunlight kissed every flake. The mirror, once a prison, now floated upon the lake's surface, clear, pure, and silent. Arden looked into it and saw not shadow or fear, but endless possibility. "The curse is no more," she said. Snow White smiled, "because you remembered that love and sorrow are one." Peace returned, deeper and truer than ever before. The seasons began to turn as they should, spring to summer, summer to autumn, autumn to winter. And winter no longer meant despair. Instead, it became a time of reflection and gratitude, when families gathered to honor the queen who thawed her heart. Snow White and Arden ruled together for many years, one guiding with wisdom, the other with courage. Under their care, Ardora became a land of art and song, a place where light and frost danced as equals. Every child grew up knowing that even pain could bloom into beauty if faced with love. And on every winter's night, when the first snow fell, the people lit lanterns across the lake. Their lights shimmered like stars upon the water, and the wind carried one voice above all, a whisper that said, "Every winter ends when the heart remembers spring." Centuries later, when time had softened into legend, travelers still sought the island once called Ardora. They said it shimmered at the edge of the world, sometimes seen, sometimes gone, a realm between seasons, ruled by no one but peace itself. On clear nights, the lake glowed faintly, and those who looked closely swore they saw two figures walking hand in hand across the light, one cloaked in snow, the other crowned in dawn. Their laughter echoed softly, like the wind through distant glass. And thus, the tale of Snow White's castle on Ice Island lived forever, not as a story of sorrow, but of rebirth. For from frost came flowers, from loss came love, and from silence came a song that would never fade. The world remembered her, not as the Queen of Ice, but as the Mother of Spring Eternal.